Dingoes target sleeping families. Three young children mauled by pack of dingoes at remote outback campground as rangers hunt aggressive animals. Three young children and a woman have been rushed for medical treatment after a series of terrifying dingo attacks at a remote campground inside Karijini National Park, prompting urgent warnings from authorities. Now we take a deeper look and break down this entire story on the AI podcast.
There's this really fascinating illusion that I think we all kind of buy into whenever we go camping.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very comforting fiction, right?
Right. We drive out into the middle of nowhere. We find this spectacularly beautiful, isolated spot, and we set up a tent.
Yeah, and somehow we manage to convince ourselves that this millimeter thick layer of nylon fabric is a fortress.
Exactly. It's like we draw this invisible line in the dirt, and we assume that inside is the human zone and outside is the wild. And we just sort of expect nature, with all its teeth and unpredictability, to respect that fragile boundary.
It's an incredibly powerful illusion. I mean, modern recreational camping relies on it heavily. We want the breathtaking aesthetic of the wilderness, the feeling of being untamed.
But we secretly demand the safety parameters of a fenced-in suburban backyard.
Precisely.
Right.
And when that invisible line inevitably gets crossed by something that doesn't understand our rules well, the psychological shock is profound because it shatters the entire premise of the vacation.
Which is exactly the premise of our deep dive today. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you could join us because we have a stack of recent, highly urgent news reports and official warnings coming straight out of Karijini National Park.
And for those who aren't familiar with it, Karijini is this stunning, remote, just incredibly rugged area in the Australian outback.
Yeah, it's famous for these ancient gorges and red rock landscapes. It's beautiful. But over the course of just a few recent days, this gorgeous getaway turned into a visceral nightmare for several families. The invisible line wasn't just crossed, it was completely dismantled by the local wildlife.
The contrast here is what makes the situation so striking. I mean, you have families traveling hundreds of kilometers looking for a peaceful holiday in nature, and suddenly they find themselves dealing with apex predators that have completely lost their natural fear of humans.
Yeah.
So our mission for you today is to dissect this terrifying series of dingo attacks at Karijini and to really examine the complex logistics behind how authorities are scrambling to respond.
Right. And we're also going to dig into the friction between human recreation and the reality of a wild functioning ecosystem. So, okay, let's unpack this because to understand how a popular family spot like Dale's Campground turns into a danger zone, we actually need to look at the climax of this event and work our way backward.
Because the climax is truly horrifying.
It is. It's like a horror movie where the threat tests the perimeter before finally striking. So picture this. It's Wednesday night. It's dark. A family is at their campsite, presumably just winding down, and suddenly a dingo moves in and attacks a 4-year-old girl, biting her on the leg.
Jeez.
Yeah, and her mother, who is right there, throws herself directly into the chaos to physically shield her daughter from this animal. And in the process of fighting it off, the mother gets bitten as well.
Wow.
They both require immediate first aid right there in the dirt of the campground before they're transported to Tom Price Hospital for further treatment.
If you look at the biology and the behavioral mechanics of what is happening in that Wednesday night scenario, it represents an absolute worst-case outcome for wildlife managers.
How so? Like, because they attacked a child?
Well, yes, but also because predators, by their very nature, are highly calculating when it comes to expending energy and taking risks. They look for the easiest, least dangerous meal.
Right, they want an easy target.
Exactly. They absolutely do not want to fight a larger animal that is actively defending its young. The fact that this dingo, or potentially a pack of dingoes, pushed through a defending adult human who is actively fighting back.
Just to continue the attack.
Yes. To continue an attack means we're looking at an animal that is highly motivated, highly habituated, and incredibly dangerous. The natural fear instinct has completely collapsed.
But, how does a wild animal's instinct collapse like that? This brings us to the timeline, because this Wednesday night horror didn't just happen in a vacuum.
No, not at all.
It wasn't one isolated rogue animal acting entirely out of character. When you comb through the reports, there is a very clear paper trail of escalation.
There really is.
Yeah, if we rewind just 2 days earlier to Monday, we see another attack. A 6-year-old boy is bitten. And this wasn't a nip on the ankle while running past. He was bitten on the neck and the arm.
Which is terrifying.
Very.
Yeah.
It required his parents to rush him to the hospital for urgent care. The idea of a wild dog going for a child's neck is deeply unsettling.
It changes the entire classification of the behavior, actually. I mean, a bite to an extremity could sometimes be categorized as an animal lashing out defensively if it was startled.
Right, like a warning snap.
Exactly. But a bite targeting the neck, a highly vulnerable, lethal strike zone, is undeniably predatory. The animal was no longer just sharing space with humans, it was hunting them.
And if we step back even further to the Saturday morning before the Monday attack, we find the catalyst. A 6-year-old girl is approached by a dingo acting aggressively, and it actually snaps at her clothing. Yeah, she escapes without physical injuries, thankfully. But it caused a huge stir among the campers. So you have Saturday, snapping at clothes. Monday, a bite to the neck and arm. And Wednesday, attacking a child and actively fighting a defending adult mother. That is a massive behavioral shift in just 5 days.
What's fascinating here is that speed of adaptation. It's the most alarming data point in these reports.
Because usually that takes longer. Right?
Oh, in the wild, genuine behavioral evolution usually takes generations. But here you are seeing a timeline compressed into less than a week. What we are witnessing is the extreme end of food conditioning.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, when a human tosses a piece of food to a wild animal, a massive physiological shift occurs. The animal's dopamine pathways literally rewrite themselves.
Wait, really? Like chemically?
Yes, chemically. Their natural fear of this larger bipedal creature is chemically overridden by the anticipation of a high-calorie reward.
So the Saturday incident was essentially the animal testing the waters, like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park testing the fences.
Precisely. They approached, they snapped at loose fabric, and importantly, they faced no severe consequences. That taught them that humans weren't a threat.
Okay, I see.
But the dangerous part of food conditioning is what happens when the expectation of food isn't met. When the next camper doesn't have a sausage to throw, the animal's anticipation turns into frustration.
Oh, wow. And in a wild dog, that's not good.
No, because in a pack predator, frustration manifests as aggression. Furthermore, dingoes are highly social animals. They learn by observing each other.
So it spreads.
Almost instantly. Once one individual realizes humans are a viable, non-threatening food source, the rest of the pack mirrors that behavior. That is how you get from snapping at a shirt on Saturday to a targeted neck bite on Monday.
It is a terrifying chain reaction, and it forces an immediate, dramatic response from the authorities. Because following the escalating attacks, the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation, and Attractions, the DBCA steps in. They initiate active nightly patrols at Dale's campground, and their stated mission, right out of the gate, is to locate and humanely destroy the dangerous animals as soon as it's safe to do so. They bypass any discussion of trapping and relocating the pack. They move straight to lethal control.
They do, because the threshold for relocation has been completely surpassed. Wildlife management operates on a strict continuum of intervention.
Like an escalation ladder.
Exactly. If an animal is simply loitering near a camp, you might haze it with loud noises. If it's becoming a nuisance, you might consider relocation. But once an animal views humans as a food source, stalks a child, targets a neck, and fights an adult, the behavioral shift is permanent.
So you can't just move them.
No. If you dart that animal and move it 100 kilometers away, it won't revert to hunting kangaroos. It will just walk until it finds another campground and hunt the humans there. The authorities recognize that this specific pack is now an imminent lethal threat.
And the DBCA took this threat so seriously that they didn't just arm the local park rangers. They actually flew in extra wildlife officers with specialist dingo management experience all the way from Perth to assist with hunting down this specific pack.
That's a huge logistical move.
It is. But this brings up a logistical question that I struggled to wrap my head around while reading the sources. How do you hunt a specific pack of wild dogs in a massive expanse of the Outback in the dark without accidentally targeting the wrong animals?
That is exactly why they had to fly in specialists. I mean, the officers from Perth aren't just there for extra firepower. They are trained in behavioral tracking.
Okay, so what does behavioral tracking look like in practice?
Well, when you are operating at night in the Outback, you aren't just looking for footprints. You are looking for very specific micro-behaviors under a spotlight. A normal, unhabituated wild dingo will generally freeze, lower its head, and quickly flee when hit with a flashlight beam.
Like a normal wild animal would.
Right. But a dangerously habituated dingo, the ones responsible for these attacks, will exhibit entirely different body language. They might hold their ground, stare directly into the light, or even walk toward the officers.
Oh, because they're expecting a food reward.
Exactly. The specialists are there to read those behavioral cues and ensure they're only eliminating the individuals whose fear instinct has completely collapsed.
Which brings me to the detail in these sources that I found the most jarring.
What's that?
You have multiple children mauled. You have an adult attacked. You have an elite team of behavioral trackers flown in from Perth, actively patrolling the brush with spotlights and rifles at night to eradicate a lethal threat. Yet despite all of this, Dale's campground remained open to the public.
It did. The park continued to accept visitors throughout the entire operation.
Wait, if there's an aggressive pack of wild dogs biting children in the neck, why on earth is this campground still accepting visitors? The reports state that rangers were warning incoming visitors and handing out safety advice on arrival.
Yep, pamphlets, basically.
Right. You have an active threat hunting in the dark, and the solution is to hand an incoming family a pamphlet and let them pitch their tent. That feels like a catastrophic failure of basic safety protocols. I couldn't believe it when I read it.
This raises an important question, though, and it sounds completely counterintuitive, bordering on negligent, until you look at the complex matrix of public land management in a place like Western Australia.
Okay, explain that to me because it sounds crazy.
You have to understand the sheer scale and geographic isolation we are talking about here. Karijini is incredibly remote. I mean, visitors plan these trips months or even years in advance, often towing caravans or driving off-road vehicles for thousands of kilometers to get there.
Definitely a trek.
Huge trek. And there are no major cities or alternative accommodations just down the road.
I understand that it is a long drive, but surely turning people around is better than putting them in the middle of a hunting ground.
Well, closing a massive recreational area in the Outback isn't like putting a padlock on a city park gate. If you suddenly close Dale's campground, you're instantly displacing hundreds of travelers who are already halfway there, or maybe already at the gate, with nowhere else to safely sleep in a very harsh environment.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, you risk creating an entirely new safety crisis involving stranded travelers, fatigue-related traffic accidents, and illegal bush camping in completely unmonitored areas.
Right, because if they just pull off the side of the highway, there's no rangers there at all. So keeping the designated campground open, even with the dingo threat, keeps the human population centralized, where the rangers can at least communicate with them.
Precisely. And it also ties into a much deeper philosophy of how the Outback is managed. In these vast frontier areas, authorities operate on a foundational legal and cultural framework of personal responsibility.
It's not a managed resort, it's the wild.
Exactly. The authorities assume that if they provide you with full transparency about the risks, if they look you in the eye and say, there is an aggressive pack of predators here, you will govern your own behavior accordingly.
They trust you'll step up.
Yes. They trust that you will physically hold on to your toddler, that you will lock your food in your vehicle, and that you will maintain total vigilance while their specialized team handles the eradication on the perimeter.
Wow, that puts an enormous amount of weight on the safety advice being handed out.
It really does.
When you look at the actual pamphlets and warnings given to these campers, it is the standard, crucial advice. Stay alert, supervise children closely at all times, and take every precaution. But there is one specific rule heavily emphasized in all the official statements, and that is to absolutely avoid feeding the wildlife.
And that rule is the entire fulcrum of this tragedy.
So what does this all mean? Because to me, it speaks directly to how people fundamentally misunderstand the environment they're entering. People treat national parks like they're immersive theme parks.
Oh, constantly.
You go to a petting zoo, you feed the goats, everyone takes a photo, and it's a harmless interaction.
Yeah.
But people pack that exact same mindset into their cars and take it into the deep outback. They see a dingo, which essentially looks like a lean, medium-sized domestic dog, and they think throwing it a piece of a sausage or some leftover chicken is just a magical vacation memory.
Right.
They completely disregard the fact that the animal is a functioning apex predator.
It is a devastating misunderstanding of ecology. I mean, the tragedy of the situation at Karijini is that the people who fed those dingoes weeks or perhaps months ago likely drove away feeling incredibly connected to nature.
Oh, absolutely. They probably posted photos online and told their friends about their amazing encounter.
And they had no idea they were leaving behind a ticking time bomb for the families who arrived this week. By feeding the dingoes, they broke the ancient, vital contract of mutual avoidance between humans and wild predators.
Which makes the official statements from the DVCA officials so heartbreaking to read. because amidst all the urgency of flying in specialized trackers and handing out safety warnings, the officials explicitly took the time to note that dingoes remain an essential, deeply important part of the natural ecosystem out there.
They belong in Karijini.
Right. They are necessary to keep the prey populations in check. But the officials also stressed that protecting human visitors is now their absolute top priority. It is a complete, unresolvable collision between maintaining a functioning ecosystem and ensuring human safety.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a profound paradox for the dingoes involved. I mean, if you look at this purely from a biological standpoint, these animals are doing exactly what wild predators are programmed by evolution to do.
Survive and find food.
Yes, they recognize a new, high-density food source, which happens to be human campsites, and they successfully adapted to exploit it. In any other context devoid of humans, that behavioral plasticity is the hallmark of an intelligent, thriving, highly successful species.
But because their success involves our campsites, it becomes a death sentence.
Exactly. Because humans have entered their habitat for our own recreation, and because we have actively altered their natural behavior through our presence and our food waste, the animals must now pay the ultimate price. They are being, quote, humanely destroyed simply for successfully adapting to the environment we created in their home.
It is a very sobering reality check for anyone who loves the outdoors. Today, we have tracked this incredibly tense escalation, from the initial boundary testing on Saturday where a dingo snapped at little girl's clothing, to the predatory neck bite on a young boy on Monday, culminating in that terrifying Wednesday night attack where a mother had to physically fight a pack in the dark to save her 4-year-old.
The timeline alone is just astounding.
It really is. And we have seen the massive logistical response. The Perth specialists brought in to track microbehaviors under spotlights. And we've explored the uncomfortable reality of keeping a remote campground open in the midst of all that chaos.
The events at Dale's campground serve as a stark, unavoidable reminder to every traveler. When you venture into these remote spaces, you are no longer at the top of an artificial hierarchy.
Right.
You are stepping back onto the food chain, supervising your children, locking away your food, and maintaining a healthy, respectful distance from the wildlife is not just bureaucratic advice. It is a vital survival mechanism for both you and the animals.
It really forces you to reconsider that millimeter of nylon fabric we talked about at the beginning. We draw our invisible lines in the dirt, but the wild doesn't read our maps, and it certainly doesn't read our safety pamphlets.
Which leaves you with an important concept to consider the next time you pack up your car for a trip into the wilderness. If human safety will always ultimately trump the survival of a native predator in its own natural habitat, at what point does a national park cease to be a genuinely protected wilderness and just become a heavily manicured outdoor hotel?
Okay, one question for you. How did a family camping holiday at a remote Outback campground turn into a nightmare after multiple children were attacked by aggressive dingoes, and should authorities have acted sooner after the first warning signs? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.